بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. The topic that I want to talk about tonight is called Tending the Earth, the Art of Living with God's Creation. And we want to talk about the environment and our obligation toward it as Muslims. And then I want to broach an idea which is not original. Many of you have probably thought about it, and you know others that have done it, and this is the creation of intentional communities that can live the kind of life that we want to live and respect the environment the way that it's supposed to be respected. And I would call those oasis communities, but you can call them whatever you want. So we want to talk about that, and we live in a time of environmental disaster, and maybe some of you doubt that. I would be surprised. This last winter, in the Arctic Circle, the temperature often did not go below freezing, and that's not good news, and that sets up all sorts of chaos in the environment. We're polluting the environment, we're destroying the water, we mistreat the animals, and in Islam we have an obligation to take care of the environment. We have an obligation to protect the water. Water is not supposed to be polluted. You could say from the standpoint of Islamic law, as some scholars have said, that this world is the garden of the animals. Animals have to be treated right. And that's a fundamental part of Islamic law. We have huququllah, the rights of God. We have huquq al-insan, the rights of human beings. We have huquq al-baha'im wal-hayawanat. You have the rights of wild animals and domestic animals. They have to be treated properly. And we have other rights like that. So we should be tending the earth. This is one of our fundamental obligations. Although, unfortunately, Muslims in the past were really good at this. And the traditional Islamic city was a garden city. You know, to have a city in Islamic law, the city is not valid if it doesn't have land. That sort of goes without saying, doesn't it? But it's got to have land that can grow food. And it's got to have water. And the water can't be from outside. It's got to be from the sky, or it's got to be from the ground below. And then you have to produce all the food you need to survive. Why? Because maybe there's going to be war. Maybe there's going to be starvation. It doesn't mean you have to eat that food. Maybe you don't like to eat it. Maybe it's barley, and you get sick of barley after a few days. But you've got to do that. And all traditional Muslim cities did that. Cairo, Damascus, Granada, Lahore, you can name them. They all did that. Even Constantinople, Istanbul. So they grow all the food they need in the city. Outside the city, even more, but maybe you have to close the walls. How are you going to survive? So traditional Muslim cities were garden cities, beautiful cities. And if we take some of the little cities, I can mention one in Yemen, for example, and they used to say that we don't have to import anything but razors, needles, and scissors. Other cities don't even have to do that. So Islamic law is based on self-sufficiency and independence, which is called freedom. You know, that we produce our food and we take care of our soil. And this is a legacy that we should bring back. And again, if we begin to do this again in intentional communities, that will be a big deal. And you know, we have a lot of people today who are concerned about the environment. Jews, Christians, Buddhists, other people. Sometimes they don't believe in anything in particular. They're doing the right thing. But usually, when they create an intentional community that's environmentally intelligent, they want to get off the grid and to go to some beautiful place in the mountains. which is a nice idea, isn't it? But that's not the priority in Islamic law. In Islamic law, the prime real estate is the inner city. It's to get in the grid. And you can do things outside the grid too. Okay, can you do that? I want to get up a little bit higher. I can see you better. I can also see my computer better. Okay, I think this is cool now. Thank you. No, this is okay. Thank you. Okay, so see, these are really important things. Land, water, food, and also soil. Because land and soil are not the same thing, are they? You've got to have living soil. You've got to have soil, not just has nutrients in it, but it's alive. If you have living soil, you have good food. And we can make living soil in 18 days. 18 days it takes to make living soil. Okay, and then where is the land we want? Well, we could take anywhere. You can go to the mountains, you can go to the desert, but the prime real estate is the city, especially the inner city, and especially inner cities where people need this. Like the inner city of Detroit, or of Flint, or, maybe the west side of Chicago, or the south side. Okay, maybe here in Boston. I don't know much about Boston, but I'm sure you've got that too. That's where we got everywhere, right? And again, this is very important as a part of da'wah. Islam has a history of intentional communities. One example of that is the great Faruq, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph. Didn't he create intentional communities? He created the city of Kufa, the city of Basra, the city of Tus, the city of Fustat, the city of Qayrawan, and so forth. You see, which would bring the Muslims together and give them their culture and enable them to protect themselves militarily, while at the same time spreading Islamic culture and Arabic language. And if you go to West Africa, the Mandinkas, they have the most ancient tradition of Islam in West Africa. The Fulanis also have a great tradition, and so do other tribes. But the Mandinkas create intentional communities which are trading cooperatives. Okay, this enables them to put together the market of West Africa over hundreds of years. This is an extremely important precedent. And out of that will come the last days of the Empire of Ghana and the great Empire of Mali and Songhai. Those are all rooted in the intentional communities of the Mandinkas. So this is a very important topic. And again, in these communities, we should address the issue of environment. So the environmental disaster, this is with us today. And we should look at it as an environmental challenge, that we're going to respond to it correctly, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We have to understand also that the environmental crisis today is so bad that most people can't admit it. And the reason for that is that you can only take so much trauma. And that's why people who are heavily traumatized, they just blank out, don't they? After a while, they don't deal with it anymore. And that's actually the way a lot of people are today, because the things we've done to our environment are so unacceptable to our natures that basically it's too much for us to deal with. And this is why also any solutions that we have in mind, they've got to be in their place, and actually they have to begin small. You're not going to be able to do anything big. So for the most part, we simply are unable, most people, to take in or to face or to manage the immensity of what has taken place in our world today. There's a deep undercurrent of grief, and the magnitude of which is simply too much for people. Also, it's good for us to begin to move in the right direction, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And at the same time, when we talk about this, it's very important for us also to bear in mind that we are not talking about solving the world's problems. Okay, because that's more than you and I can do. That's very idealistic. Wonderful if we could do it, but that's not what we're talking about. At least that's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about doing something that is small scale and that is basically for the people who need it. You know, because they're the ones who'll do it. They're the ones who will buy in. For example, in our inner cities, if we knew how to do this, and there are people who are doing this in Baltimore and other cities, okay, then you have people like, let's say, people who are coming out of the Jim Crow prison industry, okay? So they're paroled in the city, right? Where they committed the crime or the alleged crime. How good of a living are they going to make there? Nothing. Okay, so maybe a brother goes, you know, to the penitentiary for drugs. I know personal instances of this, and you may too. Some of these brothers, one of them from New York City, when he was arrested by the police, there were $20 million of cash in his apartment, believe it or not, because he could make $1.5 million in a week. Okay, so he goes to prison. He doesn't tell on anybody. He stays there for a long time. He becomes a Muslim. That's beautiful. Now, when he comes out of prison, how are you going to make a living? How are you going to make a living? You get a job. You can drive a truck or something like that. But then you didn't tell them you have a prison record, did you? So then they find out you're out of a job. Now, when you apply, you have to say, I have a prison record. Well, you're not going to be employed. So what's he going to do? In this particular case, he's back serving time right now because he goes back on drugs, dealing in drugs. Okay? And there's no vacation when you do that, is there? That's not really a nice job. You know, there's no vacation. It's day and night. So again, if we could create intentional communities that are oases in our inner cities, then you can bring them to life. Detroit is mostly boarded up. 60% of the city, rats. You know, and so you could grow the food, and then, you know, you have to have therapies, you have to have counseling, you have to have curriculum, you have to have everything. One of the things about intentional communities is that you've got to know what the skills are that are needed before you start. And you've got to have people with those skills, and they have to buy in. If you don't have that, forget it, you're going to fail. You've got to know how to do it. That's why what we, and the little group that I work with, want to do is to get manuals together. That how do you create an oasis community? And we have a seminar, a zawiya, we call it, in Spain that we're going to do this summer, called Tending the Earth, the Art of Living with God's Creation, #2. We did it last year. Last year we're talking about soil, permaculture, production. It was cool. It was really cool. You know, it was really beautiful. And we made soil. We made gardens out of soil we made. Okay? But this year we want to talk about how do you make a community that has this in it as a fundamental. How do you do a garden city? How do we do that? We want to know what are the rules. What are the mistakes? If you make these mistakes, you're going to fail. Okay? And this is not going to be easy. And people like many of us who might be middle class, upper class, they're not going to do it because they don't need to do it. We're doing all right like it is. You've got a job. You're making a good salary. You're not going to do it. You don't have a need. But the people who have a need, they will do it. And actually, this is being attempted already in some of our cities. So, but you have to know how to do it. And you've got to have money. You've got to have investment. And also, you've got to have political clearance, you know, because you've got to be allowed to do it as well. Like in Detroit, for example, a lot of people in Detroit now are growing gardens in the inner city to feed themselves. And they could buy that land for just a few dollars. Do you think the city's ready to sell it? No. If you're going to set up a casino or something like that that will make money, you'll get a deed tomorrow. Because they want money, they want revenue. Tomatoes don't pay revenue. Okay, so that is not easy because you're going against the whole process of gentrification and, you know, monetization that is the basis of the city. So we have to know how to do it. And this has got to be studied. If you look at South Africa, for example, apartheid is finished. We didn't believe that would happen, did we? But it did. But then if you go to places like Soweto, I've been there, you go to Harare outside of Cape Town, okay, that's still the infrastructure of apartheid. And it's in the worst place it can be. You know, Harare is way to the west of Cape Town. The soil is good for a cemetery, but not for growing anything. So you could build a community like this, not in Harare, but outside, just a little bit. You know, leave them. That's their property. Let them do what they want to do there. But you build it outside. Or in Soweto. In Soweto, you go to Johannesburg, and you'll see Africans, a lot of them living in Soweto. They're on the street at 5 a.m. They're pushing these carts. They've got big plastic containers. All day long, they're collecting plastic garbage, bottles and things like that. Okay, at the end of the day, they've got a whole stack of plastic. They turn it in, and they get the handsome sum of $3, maybe $5. Okay, he's going to support his family on that. She's going to support her family on that. Okay, and these are people, most of them, they are agrarian people to begin with. So again, if you could make a community like this outside of Soweto, walking distance, okay, then you can help them. And they need that. And they will support it. If you have a need, they'll support it. And to talk about doing this when there's not a need is very unrealistic. Because you've got to have to do this. You've got to buy into it. And usually you buy in because you have to do it. And then we can do it. And this is a great thing. We need to learn how to do this. It's very, very important. But we're not here to solve the world's problems. But what we are doing, if we do this, which is our tradition, is going to be a step in the right direction. And it will be good for us and for our cities and our communities. Begin where you are. Booker T. Washington said what? Put down your buckets where you are. Put down your buckets where you are. In other words, don't have dreams about going north and being better off because you live in Jim Crow America. Whether you're in the south or in the north, it's going to be the same. So put down your bucket where you are. And that's also begin where you are, with what you've got, not in an ideal world. And hitch your wagons to the stars. Okay, and the stars here are Garden City, oasis, which is what? Proper theology, proper metaphysics, proper belief, land, soil, water, food, food friends, plants and animals. Okay, and that's the dream. Okay, and then we have everything else, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, curriculum and everything else. Small solutions, slow solutions, long-term visions. That's what will make it work. You know, and if you think that we can just do this like that, well, you know that's not likely. This is hard to do. This is very difficult. Most people say it's impossible to do. I don't believe that. And there are people doing it in the United Kingdom, in Malaysia. In the United States, we have some people who are trying to do that as well. But we need small solutions, go slowly into it, long-term visions. Radical breaks and separation are failure from the first. We think we can and again, we don't want to do that Islamically. Islamically, we're not interested in getting off the grid. If you can do it, I'd love to come visit. It's beautiful to get off the grid, right? Go to the mountains, you know, go to the desert or whatever. You can make it bloom, you know, but the thing is, radical breaks from the system that we have, that's not going to work. So you want to have something that's working in the reality that's here, you know, that's using that, and then gradually working towards a solution. And, you know, you'd have a community, especially in the inner city, where people who are lawyers or in IT or who are in some other profession, medicine, they can live in that community too, and they can go make their money. Okay, so you don't have to be ideologically with us, and you don't have to be doing permaculture, and there's 1,000 other things to do. Okay, but you don't want to have a radical break. If you do that, it's failure from the first. And then any preoccupation with radicalism, what a big word, it takes our eyes off of other problems, right? So we want to have a holistic period of what's happening. I say this because a lot of people do this ideologically. God bless them. In permaculture, a lot of permaculturists are ideologues, right? They have a whole theory about agriculture and stuff like that, and God bless them. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm not particularly interested in that. I'm interested in, can you grow food? Because if you can grow, and actually permaculture can grow twice the food, 3 times the food that you would grow by regular techniques. So that's what's important. We have to learn from the successes and failures of the past and the present. That's really, really important. And then a lot of people have tried this. Some have succeeded, many have failed. So we have to learn from them. And, seek the benefit and the cooperation of all. So now I want to talk about the 5 pillars of the oasis, or if you want, the garden city. And these are what? Sound belief. Because belief always affects what we do, doesn't it? If you think this world has no meaning, if you think this world is just for your exploitation, then probably you're going to live that way. That's the way most people are today, right? When you believe that God created this world and it's beautiful, and not only that, but everything in it glorifies Allah, even the atom, and that it will bear witness on the day of judgment about you and what you did, then you have a different attitude towards it. So belief is very important. And we have amazing beliefs in that regard. So this is really important. Then also land. Okay, let's talk about that. Land. So it's said that land is the most basic metaphysical principle. Land ownership is really important. And traditionally, to talk about community without land is, from the standpoint of Islamic law, absurd. You want to have a community, you've got to have land. Now, again, we don't want to insist on that, because today we have technologies that are very beneficial. I'm able to speak to you in a low voice and you can hear me because of this technology. I'm able to be here today, although yesterday I was in Toronto, because of technology, right? We can communicate on WhatsApp and Skype and all kinds of other things because of technology. So we won't say that that virtual community is worthless, because it is very valuable. We can actually put together communities that are global, right, with that technology. Of course, when our jurists talk about that, they didn't know that technology. But still, they would say that ultimately your community needs to have land. And land is really important. And of course, the land needs water. And it needs soil that's alive. And it needs to produce food. We are land animals. We are earthen creatures. The land is important to us. I know a brother in Australia. He's from Lebanon. His family came to Australia after the Lebanese Civil War. Broken family, bad news, lives, in a horrible situation. He felt Australia never did anything for me. All I see is racism, and I'm treated as if I were second class or lower. And a group of Muslims took him out to plant trees. And he was planting trees, and he said, when I put my hand in the soil, I said, I belong here. This is my land. I love this country. It's really important. Land is important. Gardening is important. Nature is important. And in traditional Islamic societies, you really can't be human if you don't work with the land somehow, even to have a garden. And if you don't have animals, because animals make us human. You've got to treat them right. You've got to be good to them. The land does not lie. The land does not lie. It bears witness to what we have written upon it. It is a record that is easy to read in the simple language of the line, of the land, in the simple language of the land. The land is the whole story. It has grammar. It has syntax. It has vocabulary. You have to be good to it. You have to value it. So we live in a world, of course, where titanic industrialization, especially in the food industry, this has removed the organs of the terrestrial body. That's what it's doing. This is the environmental crisis we have. I live in Illinois. I live in Chicago. Illinois has this black soil that is the richest in the United States, probably. Most of it now is dead. No earthworms, no grubs, nothing. it's chemically fertilized, right? Nutrition is put in it. That's not good for you. But in any case, that soil is used to grow soybeans and corn. And the soybean and corn, does that go to Chicago? No, that goes to make your cosmetics. That goes to feed cattle, give them ulcers. It does other things like that. The city of Chicago, if it were set up with permaculture, could feed itself in 30 years. It could be a garden city. We have a long history of that. It'd take about 30 years. But right now, it's all imported, right? Illinois provides maybe 10% of the food of Chicago. So this industrialization of agriculture and of husbandry, animals, pack the chickens together, cut off their beaks so they don't peck each other. They can't even stand up. The chicken has a right to walk. The chicken has a right to get out in the sun. Cattle have a right to ruminate and to graze. That is Islamic law. You cannot do this to them. This is a crime. But also this has removed the organs of the body from the earth, destroyed the environment that we live in. In Islamic history, we are people that are said to be, a word you may have never heard before, tectonic. We're tectonic. It's a cool word, tectonic. Tectonic means we fit the earth. We fit the earth. Look at Islamic architecture, and you can look at other architecture, because many traditional people are like that. But look at Al-Hamra in Granada. Look at anything. Like, we don't tear up the earth. We build to fit the earth. And in everything we do, we respect the earth. We work with it. And Islamic architecture is usually very simple, fits the earth, and it doesn't say, look at me. That's what modern architecture says. Look at me. Even if I'm ugly, look at me. And Islamic architecture says, look at the sky. Look at the water. Look at the earth. It's tectonic, you know, so we fit the earth. And this is good for us. This is really good for us. Now, one of the things that's really important is that small estates, small gardens and small farms, small intentional communities are more productive than large ones. Okay, so this is very important. You can grow in your apartment food that will benefit you. You can have a plant bookshelf in your kitchen. It's not hard to do, and it's a revolutionary act. To produce food, to become a producer, even though you're still going to buy food at the grocery store. Nobody said you can't do that. But, you know, when you begin to produce food, that is a revolutionary act. And it's also, if you do it right, a healthy act. You know, we made soil in Spain last year in our retreat. It takes 18 days, 3 parts of carbon. Okay, that was sticks, dried sticks. That's carbon. Okay, and dried leaves. 2 parts of nitrogen, that was green grass. You can get other things. You have to water it just right, not too much, not too little. And then we use 1 part of horse manure, because we had horses there. Okay, a catalyst. Okay, then again, 3 parts of carbon, 2 parts of nitrogen, 1 part of horse manure. Got to water it just right. You put it in a wire mesh, 4 feet tall, actually 5 feet tall. In 2 days, it's so hot you can't put your hand in it. In 2 days, it's filled with all kinds of creepy crawlies. It's alive. They weren't there in the beginning. And then you have to turn it over and take the middle and put it in the outside put it in the middle. 18 days, you have good soil. 18 days, living soil, healthy soil. It's easy to do. And I think it makes the heavens rejoice. I think that. Because like you're taking care of the earth now. And the whole organic movement that came from us, did you know that? And it comes out of British India. Because in British India, which included Pakistan and Bangladesh, a lot of Englishmen went there and they found that certain villagers in what is today, especially Pakistan, were extremely healthy, especially as you get into the Himalayas. And first they say, well, what race do they belong to? They must be white people. Maybe they're from Alexander the Great. But then they got smart and they said, no, it's their soil. because their soil is alive. They do things like green manuring, which is when you plant a crop and you plow it under. Okay, it makes the soil live. So the organic movement comes out of that. And comes out of, but again, the small estate, your backyard, can produce more than the big estate. There must be easy access to land. This is Islamic law. Man ahya ardan mawatan fahiya lah. Whoever brings fallow land to life owns it. You tell me a revolutionary principle that's greater than that. That abolished the feudal system in Sicily. That abolished the feudal system in Spain and Portugal. It freed the peasants, and it made the lands rich. And you know, this is something you have to work for too. We should have easy access to land. You know, I should be able, if the land's not being used in Chicago, I should be able to get it, right? Basically for free. Or in Detroit. Okay, and that calls for legislation, doesn't it? Calls for easy access to land must be regarded as a critical human rights issue. If you live in this city, you should have access to plots of land easily. You shouldn't have to pay taxes on that. You shouldn't have to do things that make it impossible for a poor man to hold it. Okay, this is very important. Large-scale land acquisition is a problem and not a solution. That's, of course, what the food industry does, right? Buys up all this land, destroys it, ruins it. Fertility must be stressed and not efficiency. So you want your land to be fertile, alive, okay? And the efficiency of it, which is what they talk about in the food industry, that should not be the priority. Modern agriculture is concerned with efficiency, and this causes a fertility deficit. It turns the land into a barren land, that if you don't put the chemicals back in it, it won't grow anything. We can bring that land back to life, by the way. We can do that, easy. And in fact, the fertility deficit is never computed into the value. Organic farming, permaculture, and other types. We're not just saying you have to do permaculture. I happen to like it because I know it works. But you can do other things. But organic farming is a great skill that can remove flight from the city and turn the city into a garden city. And especially we're talking about our cities, Detroit, Flint, Chicago, other cities. Okay, so that's what we're going to say about land. Now let's talk about soil. So, again, as we said before, good soil means good food. Good soil is living soil. Healthy soil produces healthy food and sane people, healthy people. Okay, and it's easy to do. It's not difficult to do. It's a revolutionary act. This is a society in which you are meant to be a consumer. And to be a consumer, you've got to make money. You've got to have cash. You know, you can't just grow tomatoes. You can't just live. These are all things we have to tighten up. You've got to be able to do that. Soil determines whether nations succeed or fail in history. Soil, not land, soil determines whether nations succeed or fail in history, and this is something that FDR talked about. This is something that people were talking about in the 1920s and 1930s. You've got to protect your soil. You've got to bring it to life. And again, we're not going to solve the problems. We can't. But we will do this in our own backyards and hopefully create communities that can do this. Loss of living, rich topsoil is an economic and environmental disaster of the first order. Again, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, he said, a nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. He was right. Of course, he's saying that in the Dust Bowl, right? Because he saw it. And he saw we destroyed that soil. We did that. Okay, that soil wouldn't grow a weed for 10 years. So a nation that destroys its soil, and that's what we're doing right now. That's what we're doing right now. It destroys itself. And you can bring that soil back to life in Boston or wherever you may be. It's easy to do. You just have to be shown, and you'll love to do it. When we created this soil in Grenada, that was the highlight of the whole program. And the next day, we made, gardens that were, the same thing, carbon, nitrogen, horse manure. Okay, you build it up, you can put wood around it, but if you don't put wood, it breathes better. So we built that up, then we put garden soil on the top of it, and we planted tomatoes and peppers. Okay, the next day, it's not the rainy season in Spain, it's the dry season. It thundered for 30 minutes without stopping. I've never heard that before. Then the rain came. I had to go outside and say, is that airplanes? It thundered for 30 minutes without stopping. And then the rain came down, beautiful rain. And, I don't know what that's all about. But what I say is the heavens and earth are dancing because we're doing it right. We're bringing you back to earth. That's what I believe. I'm a little bit crazy, okay? But we love that. And this is a good thing to do. And this is what we can do. You can do it right now wherever you live. It's easy to do. It's good for your health. It's good for your humanity. There's a great Australian woman. Her name is Christine Jones. She says the well-being of nations is determined by whether or not soil is being made or lost. We're not doing that right now, are we? We're losing our soil, killing our soil. Soil is a nutrient bank. This is talking about living soil. Soil you make, the soil that you cultivate. Our food today is of the lowest quality, even though the soil is nutrient rich. But that's because it's not alive. It's got to be alive. Composting, rapid soil building, this is something that we got to learn how to do. I believe that. And I think you'll love it if you learn how to do this. This gives you humanity. It really does. The soil's got blessing in it. Soil is not a factory. The agricultural industry looks upon soil as a factory. It seeks to extract as much as possible from it before it's destroyed and thrown away. And then we move on. Okay? That's what they do. Chemical-based agriculture destroys the soil and wipes out the landscape. We say that composting is easy to do. You've got the garbage right there in your kitchen. It is one of the most valuable of all activities. And it's easy to do. It's beautiful to do. It's rewarding to do. The law of return. What you take out must be put back. So we can't make them do that on these big farms, right? Monsanto. And you can't compete with them either. I remember I went to Wisconsin to sacrifice a sheep for my little grandson. I've got a lot of them, by the way. And granddaughters as well. And so I wanted to sacrifice a sheep, a beautiful sheep. I got an incredible sheep. It was grown outside. It was a Caribbean sheep. And you talk about good meat. It was fantastic. And so we were there. This man runs an organic farm. And I was looking at his corn. And I said, that corn must be really good. He said, that's all Monsanto. Because he said, I can't grow organic corn and stay in business. If I do, when Monsanto's corn is pollinated on my land, they take me to court. And they've got all the money in the world, and I don't have anything. So they shut me down. Okay, this is the way it is. But the law of return is that what you take out, you must put back. And we understood this very well in our history. What is the first revolution in Islam? Agriculture. After the Islamic conquests, in Spain and Portugal and Sicily. Sicily was 100% Berber island for 300 years. Maybe not quite 100, but almost. Sicily was green under Islamic rule. And we knew you've got to put back what you take out. You've got to put back what you take out. So this is the law of return. Let's look a little bit at water. All social, political, economic activity must be focused on the primacy of food production, and that requires, of course, also water. Keep your eyes on annual evaporation, not just annual precipitation. That's part of the thing of understanding the way the world works, is look at the whole picture. But we talk about annual precipitation. How much does it rain? But you've also got to look at annual evaporation. How much do we lose? And again, in things like permaculture and traditional Islamic agriculture, we pay a lot of attention to that. How do you reduce evaporation? And again, if you create real living soil, the water won't evaporate because it's got organic material to hold it. It's really vibrant. Annual evaporation increases with environmental destruction. You lose water. It decreases with environmental health. You have an arid climate when you have more evaporation than precipitation. Okay, and this is another thing permaculture is doing. Again, we're not against technology, brothers and sisters. I know that most of you are not anyway. You don't have to be told that. But we don't want to come off on the record that we're against technology. That's not true. And you have a plow now that was developed by an Italian called the dolphin plow. And the dolphin plow is incredible. And the dolphin plow has been used in Burkina Faso. It's been used in Mali to take the desert and to make it bloom again. But to do that, you've got to use the villagers, because the kind of plants you want to grow there, which are desert plants, you can't plant the seeds and expect them to grow, because they have to be scarred. And scarred means what? They've got to be eaten by animals and pass through the manure. So to get that seed, you've got to go through the manure and pick it out. Now, villagers will do that for you. And then you plant those seeds and you've got the desert back. I mean, you've got the desert green again. And the dolphin plow is incredible. It creates catchment basins. So you collect the water, then you plant the seeds, and they've done this in Burkina Faso. They've done this in Mali. I've seen it. It's really beautiful. So, this is reducing evaporation, you see? And then you collect the precipitation that comes. And now the desert is reclaimed. We can do that. We're talking always about, the expansion of the Sahara Desert, for example. It's a big problem. But this is also because of false use of the land, improper use of the land. Rainwater harvesting is extremely beneficial. And that's why when you want to talk about water, then you want to look up in the sky too. It does rain in Boston, doesn't it? So you can harvest the rain. Probably if you dig down, you get a well. In Chicago, you will. Lake Michigan's there. And that water should be good, if there's not something else in it, like mercury or something like that. But, the water that's under the ground, that's very valuable. And the water that's on the ground, like a spring, that's very valuable. But rainwater is too. And Muslims were the great collectors of rainwater. What we did with that, you wouldn't believe, in the Umayyad period, in the Abbasid period, in Spain. Okay, so that's what we say about water. Let's say something about food friends. Food friends. What are food friends? Plants and animals. Okay? Food must be about food. Food must be about food. What in the world does that mean? What else would it be about? Food must not be a proxy or a subset of something else. Can't be about profit. Food has got to be about food. We live in the post-food, post-agrarian age, and that's the end of history and civilization. It's not progress in the right direction. Again, we were the greatest agrarian civilization that ever existed. Believe me, the Muslim world, we were great at agriculture. We were really good at husbandry, cattle, camels, sheep. We knew how to do that. And let's get that back. Food must be about food. You have a right to food. This must be a human right. And You know, I don't know much about Boston, but I know about Chicago. And you know about the inner city, don't you? They're all the same, aren't they? You can get alcohol there pretty easy. You can get drugs there just like that. You know, where are you going to get good food? It's a food desert, isn't it? You know, you have children growing up on Twinkies and things like that. You know, and people have a right to food. And again, these are things we have to also militate for. I want access to land. I want to be able to buy that plot in Detroit. You give me the deed tomorrow, you know? And we've got to have rights to food. And you've got to bring food into the inner city. You cannot let these people starve. You know, you've got to produce that. Again, we can do it ourselves. If we can get the land, we can do it ourselves. Every man, woman, and child must have adequate access to food. Human rights. You want to talk about human rights? That's a human right. And that's a human right we need in our cities. Isn't that true? And you need it also everywhere else, because actually now, even rural America is like the inner city. And there's a book called Aliens in Their Own Land that came out maybe 2 years ago. It's about rednecks in Louisiana. Okay, but they now are dying. You know, they're sick. They're dying of opioid overdoses. They're committing suicide. But they don't get it. They vote for Trump. They don't get it. But, you know, they're in trouble too. It's just they don't know where to go. And they can't ask the right questions. But you have a right to food. This must be equated with calculation. This must not be equated with calculation of minimal protein and calorie intake. No, food is about food. We must have an adequate system of food production. Okay, and this empowers the common man and the common woman. Power to the people, that's what we said in the 1960s, right? Power to the people, you know. But this is power to the people. Give them food, give them access to land, give them access to food. It must not undercut its own future through land depletion. Food, you can't undercut its own future by land depletion. Law of return, you've got to give out what you take back. Food production is the first and most fundamental of all human activities. Food production is the first and the most fundamental of all human activities. You've got to respect farmers. You've got to respect shepherds. These are honorable people. The Rohingya, your brothers and mine, right? They are the most oppressed people on the face of the earth today. And why? Because they've got nothing to contribute to modern civilization, because they're all farmers or fishermen. That's what they are. They're farmers or fishermen. And that doesn't count for much today. You know, you go into the farmlands and see what the farmer's doing, who is just an ordinary family farmer. He can't survive. He can't paint his house. He can't paint his barn, because there's no money in it. You've got to have big, massive production to get money. So food production is the first and most fundamental of all human activities. And you've got to honor the farmer. You've got to honor the gardener. You've got to honor the shepherd who takes care of the sheep or raises the camels or does it. That's really valuable. Food production is the primary human vocation. Today we don't think about that. You're going to be a farmer? Like you're a failure? But that's not. It's an honorable profession. And especially if we do it right. And we do it in the right context. Civilization must provide sufficient food, and it's not doing that, is it? It's not doing a lot of other things as well. Food production must not be monetized. Can't be turned into a profit proposition. Surplus food mountains result from withholding food to run up the price. See, that's what they do, isn't it? That's what they do. They withhold the food to run up the price because it's about profit. The monetization of food production is completely at odds with international legal obligations. By the way, if you look at international law, you'll find that there's a lot of good things there. It's just nobody follows it. Nobody cares. Like the Rohingya, okay, they're living in genocide. Will the United Nations use that word? No, because if they say it's genocide, they have to do something about it. And they don't want to do anything about it. So don't call it genocide. We'll call it other things. The most oppressed people on the face of the earth. But give me a break. If this is not this is classical genocide, what's happening in Burma. Agriculture is the bedrock. Agriculture is the bedrock. Okay? Respect it. Honor it. And again, if you remove agriculture from monetization and you make it about food production, we're going to be okay. The farmer can live again. You know, animal husbandry and animal products, these are also absolutely important. Animal husbandry, as you know, is raising animals. Chickens are so cool. They really are. Chickens will tell you a lot about yourself. They're beautiful creatures. And if you want to make your agriculture work, chickens can do it. Ducks as well. It's good for your children to be around chicken and ducks. Islamic cities were filled with animals. And we had green zones around our cities. You know, and the green zone is made so that you can take your animals out to the green zone, you can graze them and so forth, and bring them back by nightfall. Our cities were amazing, really they were. Husbandry, commerce and crafts. Trade. We can trade among ourselves. We can do other things. Crafts. Learn crafts. Commerce should be based on agriculture and husbandry. And again, the traditional Islamic city, and we can do this again, you think that if you're producing your own food, that you're not going to have a rich market. No, you're going to have an absolutely rich market because you're self-sufficient now. So what you import is going to be something you don't need. And so you'll have a rich market, but you're not dependent on anything that you import. Crafts are really important. We call that in Arabic sina'a. Sina'a, applied crafts. Traditional Islamic society was highly skilled. We were craftsmen and craftswomen in everything we did. You wouldn't believe that today, would you? Colonialism destroyed all of that. Colonialism wiped that out. You know, cities like, say, Halab in Syria, they produce such good cloth. The Europeans couldn't approach it. Damascus as well. Morocco as well. Madras in India. When the colonial powers come in, they destroy all of that. And then you're going to buy our cloth. You're going to buy our goods. So it's economic warfare. True husbandry and animals are your extended family. If we have food oasis, we can have extended families again. We can have beautiful families. You can hold your family together. Now that's not easy to do, but you can do that. But the animals you have are also your extended family. They're beautiful. They give you life. You love them. You know, okay, so plants and trees. I'll end with this. Plants and trees, they worship God, don't they? They glorify God, don't they? Every plant has stamped upon it the name Ar-Razzaq. Because all they do is produce things for you. They give you medicine. They give you oxygen. They give you leaves to shade. They give birds nests to live in. They give you wood. You know, they give you carbon. They give you everything. Razzaq, you know. But do you know what a tree or a plant is? It is three things. Do you know what they are? Light, air, and water. That's all a plant is. Isn't that miraculous? A tree, a big tree, is nothing but light, air, and water. And God makes it into lumber, and He makes it into these other things. In any case, I just wanted to put these ideas out there. I really believe that we need to know how to do this. And we need to learn how to do this. Are you going to do it? Am I going to do it? I'm too lazy. Okay? And also, I don't need to do it. You know, I'm pretty comfortable, unfortunately. Well, I hope it remains that way. But there are people that do need it. And they're the ones who will do it. And we've got to be able to show them how to do it. And in the long run, you know, this is something I believe we need for the da'wah. Because if we can create these kind of communities, then you can bring the convert in. This is what we did with Umar. The convert comes into Kufa or Basra. We give him or her a job. They then create a whole new order in the society. This is what the Mandinkas did in West Africa. You see, so this is a very good idea, I believe. And if you don't believe in it, you don't have to. You know, you're free to do what you're doing already. You're doing a good job. Look at this beautiful mosque. Look at this beautiful community. But what we're trying to do in our little group is try to get together, pray for us that we can do it, a lot of talk, little production, you know, but to get a manual for an oasis community. And that would take some time, won't it? But like there are people that are doing this successfully. And there are people that tell you what not to do. That's got to be there. And then maybe, you know, maybe we could create 3 of these in Detroit, a couple of them in Chicago, because you just have to have the money, the man and woman power, the skills and the buy-in, and then you can do it. And we know how to do it. Okay, so this is something that, as we said again, going back to the great Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington didn't get along. Du Bois is a revolutionary. Du Bois is an incredible man, as you know. You know, The Souls of Black Folk. That's a great book. A great, great book. But Booker T. Washington, although he's at the different end of the spectrum, he's pragmatic. And he's just telling them that you're living under Jim Crow. So put down your bucket where you are. You're not going anywhere. You know, and do the best that you can do with what you've got. So I think this is for us too. Put down our buckets, but then dream. Hitch your wagons to the stars. You know, and dream about many things. You can dream about many things, but I say dream about, you know, Bunya al-Islamu ala khams. Islam was, you know, how do we translate that? Islam was founded on 5 pillars. Actually, that's not a good translation. Bunya in Arabic means to construct, but we use it primarily for tents. Okay, and bina is fundamentally a tent. It's also a structure. So Bunya al-Islam means the tent of Islam. Using the metaphor of a desert tent, is pitched on 5 poles. They're not really pillars like a Greek mansion. Okay, and you have the center pole. Okay, that's sound belief, sound understanding. And then you've got 4 poles around that, which of course in Islam are the 5 pillars, but also land, soil, living soil, water and food, food friends. And we can build that tent. That's my dream, and you've got your dream, but I think it's a good dream to have, but we've got to make it real. And we've got to understand how difficult it is, because when you do that, you have hit the system where it hurts. It's not going to let you get away with that. You think Monsanto is going to allow you to replace Monsanto? No, they'll fight you to the death. And we also have COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO watches some of our brothers and sisters very carefully. What did J. Edgar Hoover write about the great Malcolm X? We don't want any more black messiahs in the black community, like Malcolm X. He said that. I didn't say that. So they watch who could be a Malcolm X, who could be a Harriet Tubman. You know about that. You know about that better than I do. You know, so our cities also are not easy in my belief, but we will succeed. We will succeed. And Allah didn't bring all these incredible African people here for no reason. You know, they're brought here for a reason. And inshallah, we can help save the First Nations with these things as well. I was just visiting the Cree Nation in northern Alberta, because we had a wonderful sister whose name was Sana Ghani. Some of you may know her. And she devoted her short life to the Cree Nation. She'd go there and teach. They're beautiful people, way up in northern Alberta. And she loved them, and she taught them, and she helped them so much. And then last January, she was killed in a car accident, you know, of freezing rain and black ice. And she shouldn't have been out on the road, but she was. And, you know, so we wanted to see them because they love her and they miss her. And we took her family there to visit them. But, you know, with First Nations, you don't want to get on their reservation and try to convert them. That wouldn't be right. But if we knew how to make oasis communities, you could build an oasis outside, and they could come and use it and benefit from it, and maybe imitate it and do it their way. But we would be good neighbors, we'd be good allies. That's just an idea. It's just an idea. But ultimately, when Islam begins to spread, it takes off. It takes off. It usually follows a bell curve. Starts little, little, little. And then you get somebody big who becomes a Muslim, like Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali. And then it begins to go up. And then something else happens, boom, it shoots up. What are you going to do with all the brothers and sisters? We can't deal with what we've got right now. You've got Muslims becoming, in West Africa, you've got tribes embracing Islam that never would give Islam the time of day in the past, like the Balanta of Guinea-Bissau. You know, they're coming into Islam in droves. What are we going to do about that? In Mongolia, you've got Mongols embracing Islam as well, who are the enemies of Islam. So, you know, we've got to learn how to build our communities better and better. You've got a beautiful community. I'm honored to be here. You know, and you're doing it right. You're not doing it wrong. But we also need to look further down the road, right? And we've got to have things ready so that when the people come in, afwajan, that we can give them something they need. You've got to take in the convert. And, you know, it's really important. You've got to take him in or her in. How are we doing for time? Huh? And we have time for questions? Huh? How many? So we've got 5 or 10 minutes. Would you like to ask a question?
How much land do you think you need to sustain one family?
Oh, how much land do you need to sustain one family? Depends on how big the family is. It depends on how big the family is. Yeah, you know, there is a family in California that have a backyard which is no bigger than this room. And they produce there, through permaculture, over $20,000 worth of good food a month. Okay? I learned that from Ramiz Kent. So actually you don't need a whole lot, but you need to know how to do it, how to plant it, how to do that. So this is the thing that's really important, is that you don't really need a lot of land, you know, but you've got to know how to do it. You've got to know how to do it. That would be my answer to you. A little land goes a long way if that land is properly taken care of, which is what we're supposed to do in the first place. Yes.
My question is that, Assalamu alaikum. It's a beautiful concept that, mashallah, you have presented. My question is that, is this concept been put to practice? And if so, how many oasis communities are in the United States, where they are, and how successful they are?
Well, that's the point,
Jazakallah khair.
is that we want to put it into practice, but it's not in practice now, because we don't know how to do it. This is one of the things we'll be studying this summer. So there is a man named Mulroy in the United Kingdom. So he's doing good things. We want him to come and talk to us. There is a group in Malaysia who are doing this, I think, right. So we want to study that. And, you know, we need to study other things. So there are people that are trying to do this. So let's see what they're doing, right? Let's not reinvent the wheel. But the fact is that we don't have any of these that I know of right now. I'm just saying that as we go forward, this is something good to do, in my opinion. And in the past, we've done it. In the past, we've done it very successfully. No sisters over here with any questions? Zainab? We'll come back to you, hopefully. Okay. Victory.
Thank you, Shaykh Umar. I'm really I'm really struck by this idea, and I think it's what you said about gardening, about planting, about producing food as revolutionary strikes a chord with me, and but what I want to ask and maybe push back on is like, you said middle class and upper middle class Muslims here don't need this. And at the same time, there's this sense that there's so much that's being restored in the process of growing food or building these communities, right? One is the connection with land, one is like the connection with each other, this process of like rehumanizing ourselves, and then also being very sure and unequivocal about the source of our sustenance, which is not something that modern capitalism affords us. And so I think I worry about, if we're doing this completely for others who are disempowered, of this becoming like a paternalistic project.
That's an extremely good observation. So when I say we don't need it, first of all, maybe I should say we don't think we need it. That might be a better way to say it, because actually we do need it too, but we just don't know that. And if you don't know that, you're not going to make the sacrifices that you need for it. Whereas there are other people that it's not hard to convince them that they need it. Okay? But you say it's really important. You don't want to be paternalistic about this. And that's why they've got to own it themselves. But, if we can put together how to do it, you see, then we have a manual that I could use too, if I weren't so lazy, and that other people could use also. And then we see, what is the easy route? And for example, what would work in Soweto? Would it work also in Chicago? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. These are things we have to learn. So there might be different variations for different cultures, for different climates. But those are all very good insights. And we don't want to be paternalistic about anything, but give the people a gift that they can use, inshallah. Huh? Okay, one more question. One more question. Okay, you got it. He's up. I'm looking at you. Yeah. Inshallah.
First off, I want to thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. So, as me being a university student, can everyone hear me?
If you put a little bit closer.
Okay, so I'm a university.
Pretend you're a rapper. You see?
Okay, I'm a university student, and I just want to know what can my generation do to break the cycle that I think a lot of us are caught in? To explain.
Say that again, please.
What can my generation do to break the cycle that I believe we can often get caught in? So let me explain a little further. Kind of broken. So what I mean by that is I'm in university now. I consider myself pretty intelligent, but I feel trapped in the economic cycle here in which I need to get a job. So for example, I'm in investment banking. And I want to know, how can I get out of that cycle to start a project just this in the future?
So this is the point. You see, that when you're in this system, you've got to earn money. And the money is not worth much, is it? And every time you earn a sum of money, inflation makes it worth less. So we become slaves of the system. And, so if we were able to create self-sustaining permacultural or organic or agriculturally based communities, then basically the money is not so necessary anymore. Again, we have to have access to land. And you've got to have easy access to land. That's a political, legal issue. Okay, and you have to fight that. You'd have to fight that, and that's a good cause. We want access to food. We want access to land. These are human rights. That's a good count. That sounds good, doesn't it? Power to the people. This is the people's right. That sounds good to me. I think you could get people behind that. But the thing is that in the system makes you totally dependent on it. and you've got to earn cash, you know? And if you don't do that, then you can't do anything. And this is why most of us who have careers, we want to know if we can get employed, and we want to know if we can make 6 figures, right? And that's okay, you do that. If you succeed at that, alhamdulillah, because you're going to help us. We're going to say, don't do that. But the thing is that if you succeed at creating the alternative, then you could also, if you wanted, sort of bow out. You see, because now you have a community that is self-sustaining, and Islamic law. If you study Islamic law, one of the greatest things about it is that it gives us self-sufficiency. I mean, this is incredible. You know, we did not need nation states. I'm talking about the modern nation state. We don't need that. We educate our people. We take care of our people. We produce our own scholars through endowments, through awqaf. The state, in the tradition of Islam, it has to protect us from the enemy outside the gate. It's got to protect us from robbers and highway robbers on the inside. It's got to collect zakat. It may have to collect taxes. Sometimes it has to do that, although taxes are basically illegitimate in Islamic law. Because if you're running things right, you don't need them. And it's got to have things like the hisbah, the magistrate, who sees that you're building your houses right, you're protecting other people's rights, you're not cheating in the market, and so forth. And you've got to have a judiciary, and you've got to be able to enforce it. That's what our states did. They did not educate us. We did it ourselves. Our hospitals were run by endowments. So here, if you apply that, and again, if you have your own independent oasis communities, you could begin to do a lot of incredible things. You could, really. And that's why don't think this will be easy, especially not in Uncle Sam's backyard. It won't be easy. And this, I would say, if we don't believe this is going to be opposed, then we're not being very wise. And this is another reason why, in my opinion, we have to know how to do it. And we can, maybe New Zealand, we can do it there. Malaysia, New Zealand's an agrarian land. That's why it's poor, whether you know that or not. Because New Zealand's basically agrarian. And so it's not like Australia. Australia's got agriculture and other things, but it's got a rich economy. New Zealand doesn't. New Zealand might be a place to do this. Guyana, this incredible country, you know, in northeast South America, that's 12% Muslim already. It's a black country, Africans and Indians. Beautiful country. You could do this in Guyana, big time, in Trinidad, in Barbados, in Jamaica. Okay? It's that we got to learn how to do it, that's all. We've got to learn how to do it, and then we have to propagate it. And again, as our sister Zainab said, we won't be, inshallah, we won't be paternalistic about this. This is to free the people, to liberate the people. But, you know, if you want to do this, brother or sister, how do you do it? And we make it easy, Bismillah ta'ala. I believe that's the future. And again, you know, how long is this economy of ours going to last? You know, that you remember what happened in 2008? The end of 2007, you know. The markets fell, didn't they? Okay, so now if you were to take all the money that's out there in the world today, how many trillions is it? Most of it is funny money. I'm not talking about digital currencies. If you look at the derivatives and the derivative market, that is so many times more than the trillions of dollars, you can't even compute it. And derivatives are controlled by a very small elite. A very small. Elijah Muhammad, he used to say, 10% of the people are bloodsuckers of the poor. He said 85% of the people are deaf, dumb, and blind. 5% of the people have to be what? Teachers of the poor. That's where you get the expression 5%er. And originally the 5%er is teacher of the poor. That's originally what it means. Okay, today is not 10% are bloodsuckers of the poor, is it? It's like not even 1%. Okay, and we have to be teachers of the poor, don't we? We have to be servants of the poor. And now the poor are much more than they ever have been before. So, you know, we have got to have our own base, land. You know, and the land's not going to be like we're going to take the state of New Mexico. They're not going to let you do that, or me. But it's like, I want my own backyard. You see? And we could, like the lot down the street, we can turn it into a garden, and then we can have our own schools, we can have our own clinics, we can have our own medicine, which can be allopathic, it can be, the standard medicine, and it can be also traditional medicines. Traditional medicines do wonders. You know, I know people in West Africa that can cure you with barks of trees you never ever saw before. They can do that. And I know people in the Algerian desert that will create for you medicines that will detoxify you, and they knew how to do that in the 19th century. That's amazing, isn't it? See, so we can do what we want. We can have our own schools. We can have our own clinics. We can have our own crafts. And again, we don't want to cut off the society at large. So if you're a lawyer or a doctor, join us. Keep your job. Make $1 million. And if you want to give us some, it's okay. And if you don't, you can be with us anyway. See, that's the thing. You don't want any radical splits. You know, you don't want to exclude anyone. You want to include everyone. And we work with the reality we've got right here. And to me, this is the future. This is the future. And if the economy fails, again, which could be at any time, this is what some people say. It won't be the banks this time. It will be the Federal Reserve. It'll go right to the Federal Reserve. So what are we going to do then? Then maybe we all need this. So it's kind of a good idea to get started, to think about it. And, you know, we say in Islam, La amal bila ilm. Okay, there is no practice without knowledge. You can't pray if you don't know how to pray. You can't pay zakat if you don't know how to pay zakat. You've got to know how to do it first. You can't make soil if you don't know how to make it. Wala ilma bila amal. And there is no knowledge without practice. So your knowledge only becomes worthy of that name when you put it into practice. وَمَنْ عَمِلَ بِمَا عَلِمَ أَوْرَثَهُ اللَّهُ عِلْمَ مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ يَعْلَمُ. Whoever will put into practice the knowledge that he knows, God will give him or her the knowledge of what they didn't know. So if we begin to knock on the door, it's going to open wide. That's what I believe. And God bless you, bless your wonderful community. This is the city of Malcolm X, isn't it? Because his sister lived just around the corner, right? This is the boulevard of Malcolm X. That was a great man. That was a great man, right? Muhammad Ali, and you're great people too. And, you know, inshallah, you know, we will get on our feet and we will do things right. And we may be the salvation of this country, because this country's in trouble. We have a high school in Chicago. Right now it's got 30 suicides in 1 year, and the year's not even over. I know a student who's had 3 suicides in her class. What's going on? Then you have other schools where some, pathological whatever walks in with a gun and just starts shooting down his friend. What's wrong with us? In Islam, we'll stop with this because we have to pray, but you have 6 major objectives in Islamic law, don't you? Preservation of deen, good religion. Preservation of self. You've got to be safe from attack. In Chicago, we have Iman, Inner City Muslim Action Network. You have beautiful brothers there. You've got other brothers who can't come there because they've got to cross such and such gang territory. That's dangerous. You may not get home. So you have to be safe from that. You can't be in danger from gangs, but we are. We are. You've got to be safe from disease and from sickness and other things. Intellect, you've got to have sanity. You've got to have education, illumination. You've got to have family, right? You've got to restore the family. You've got to have property, mal. It's not just money, it's property. Land, food, animals, gold and silver, money, clothing, right? Got to have access to property, proper distribution of wealth. Sharia does that beautifully. And you've got to have what is number 6? Honor. Ird, honor. And if you destroy any of those, the society will fall. And in the United States, have we protected any of those? Not a one. Not a one. And that's not true just of the inner city or of the African American community as a whole, or of First Nations or of Latinos. It's even true of whites. None of this is preserved now. So how much time is left? You know, and Allah bless us, give us tawfiq. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى وجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعد تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. والسلام عليكم.